Good morning. My name is Mike Graydon. I'm the CEO of Food and Consumer Products of Canada, and welcome to our 9:30 session here at CL. And thank you for joining us for the topic of embracing the revolution, food industry's opportunity and growth in the plant-based world. And certainly is sort of a dynamic time with this particular product line. I think if you look back, Dalhousie University's just recently done a study where nearly 1 in 5 Canadians have decided to either reduce the amount of meat that they consume or outright eliminate it from their diets. I think there's been a lot of rhetoric or a lot of communication around the world about Beyond Meats and what's going on with that organization, about to go public with a market capitalization of about $1.2 billion. They're in 25,000 restaurants around the world and have now started to emerge here in the Canadian grocery market. And if you happen to listen to the radio in the car on the way in here, you probably heard a Sobeys commercial talking about the launch of their product into the Sobeys world as well. Nielsen's, in tracking this particular segment, believe that the size of it here in Canada is about $1.3 billion and about $3.1 billion in the United States, both growing around 7 to 8% a year. So some really nice growth in a category that's not necessarily new to the marketplace. And I think there's been a lot of noise about plant-based proteins over the last year, but in fact, it actually has been around for quite a long time. Before we get into it any further, I'd like to introduce our esteemed panel that we have with us today. To my left is Sylvain Charlebois. Sylvain is a professor in food distribution and policy in the faculties of management and agriculture at Dalhousie University in Halifax. And he is also the senior director of the Agri-Food Analytics Lab, which is also located at Dalhousie University. And Sylvain has been a tremendous advocate of our food processing industry here in Canada. Next to Sylvain is Ian Roberts. He's the Vice President, General Manager at ConAgra Brands. In his current role, he oversees the Canadian operations with specific responsibility for business development, market strategies, and trade relations. Ian brings 20 years of diverse experience from Nielsen, Kellogg's, and several leadership roles within the ConAgra group, and he's played key roles in developing the strategic plan for the Canadian market, as well as leading their integration activities and acquisition activities, with the most recent being Pinnacle Foods. And Beena Goldenberg is the Chief Executive Officer of Hain Celestial, a leading natural and organic food and personal care company with brands such as Yves Veggie Cuisine, Celestial Seasonings Tea, Europe's Best Frozen Fruit, Terra Root Vegetable Chips, Dream No Dairy Beverages, and Live Clean personal care products. She's been in this role for over 13 years and has quadrupled the Canadian business through organic growth and acquisitions. So all three very well positioned to be able to talk about this topic. So let's start, Sylvain. Where's all this coming from? From a research perspective, what is driving this growth and why is there so much noise today?
Yeah, it's hard to really pinpoint one factor. I would say there are several factors. As you mentioned earlier, and I think my fellow panelists would agree that it's always been there, but we've never given it some attention. On the supply side, obviously, we're catching up in terms of scalability and everything else. We talk a lot about veganism and vegetarianism and flexitarianism. We estimate that there are about 500,000 vegans in the country, no more than that. But what is really driving everything are flexitarians in particular. And that's why when you go to the Sobeys store, you're going to find that Beyond Meat product right next to the bloody stuff, basically. Because they're just trying to replicate somewhat, and the CEO of Beyond Meat is on record of saying that. They want to just replicate what people are accustomed to. So that bridge is being socially normalized a little bit, more so than ever, through social media. Stating that you're a vegan is okay now. Like 20 years ago, people didn't even know what a vegan was. Now today, it's socially normalized. And that's kind of driving everything else.
I'm still trying to figure out this flexitarian thing. Beena, your organization's been in this for a long time, and I know in our conversations, because we work together, it's not new news for your organization. So where do you see the opportunities going forward?
I will say we've been in this space for a long time. I mean, Yves Veggie Cuisine has been around since 1985. So, we've been in the space and we've been watching it move from a very niche category as it's grown. To Sylvain's comment, it has become more a buzz recently, and it comes along with millennials being more accepting of eating more plant-based. So millennials are helping drive the flexitarian movement a little bit. But certainly if I look back over the last 4 years, we've seen double-digit growth in this category for the last 4 years. So this isn't a Beyond Meat new news. Now they're creating a lot of buzz in the marketplace, but this has been gaining momentum for the last 4 years. And certainly we see people just wanting to eat healthier. We know that including plant-based in their diet is a healthier way to eat, and it's why the government of Canada changed the food guide to include plant-based foods. So this has been coming, and I think, the Beyond Meat story is creating a buzz in a category that had momentum already.
Ian, from your perspective, you've just made a major acquisition in Pinnacle Food, which is well vested in this particular area. What part of it do you see as the best growth opportunity within sort of the lineup that you've now acquired?
Yeah, I think first of all, there's a wide spectrum of where you can play as consumers are looking to introduce more plant-based products into their diets. So we just see that growing space. I think it's almost 10 times the rate of center of store. And we're looking to introduce it we'll take some of our iconic brands that we have already in Healthy Choice. We're increasing the amount of vegetarian offerings. We're increasing the protein with protein bowls. We'll also look at our Gardein and Earth Balance opportunities of existing vegan and vegetarian meat alternative products. So there's a wide spectrum of where you can play. I think too is that this notion of this space is not new. I think what it is where we are on that adoption curve into more mainstream and just a proliferation of who wants to purchase those products. I mean, I don't know exactly where we are on the inflection curve to full proliferation, but it's gonna grow faster over the next period versus slow down. I think you've got millennials definitely interested. There's a lot of millennials that have yet to start families. Their preferences of how they're going to prepare their meals, where they're not going to go out for dinner as much once they have kids. They're going to be looking for more products in grocery stores that meet those needs. And then I think too is you've got older generations that aren't as inclined to eat as much plant-based currently today. That's going to open a broader opportunity as well. So there's a runway of growth here, and I think you're seeing more companies start to say, well, how do my brands fit? How can I modernize them? How can I evolve them to fit that space? And we'll just see a greater proliferation.
Let me just put some numbers on what Ian's talking about. Today, the household penetration for plant-based meat alternatives is 14% in Canada. It was 12% a year ago, so it's increased 2%. But in the UK, it's 73%. So the UK, when you think about how big the opportunity is, you look at the leading markets, and while I know we typically look at the US market and Canada to get some gauge, the US is not a leader in this space. It is the UK, and you see the development and the opportunity, and it's massive.
Is this, Sylvain, is this about saving the planet, or is this about healthy eating?
There's a mixture of factors. The three big ones that we've assessed at Dal are, yes, the environment, climate change. People feel empowered to do something as they make food choices. I think it's pretty clear. The other one is animal welfare. It's not as significant as the environment, but animal welfare appears to be a factor for a variety of demographics, in particular the younger demographics, the millennials and the Generation Z. But the big one is health. Health is affecting most demographics. Really, the boomers, the millennials, X's, everyone is looking at health as a factor when they actually look at their meat consumption, generally speaking. That's kind of what we're seeing at Dal.
And just to add to that, and again, put a few numbers on it, when we asked the question across the UK, the US, and in Canada, health comes out around 85% of the reason for buying into meat-free, plant-based foods. And when you look at environment, it is a much, much lower. It's in the 20% range, and it's always identified as a secondary or tertiary consideration. So health is the primary consideration consistently coming out in all the research.
And I think, sorry, I was just going to add it. I think too, as people look to eat healthier and they look to introduce more plant-based foods into their diets, it's not always meat alternative. So, and this has been around for a while as well, but you've got cauliflowered rice, you've got spiraled vegetables turning into pasta. So there is a spectrum of people that will say, I'm still going to get my nutrition through an animal protein, but if I can substitute the rice and the pasta for plant-based, that's moving me along that spectrum of eating more plant-based foods and eating a healthier diet. So there's a wide spectrum, snacks, nuts, seeds, all of those can provide you with the nutrition of protein. We're just looking at multiple ways to do it. So I think that's expanding the news that you're hearing about it, the appetite for it for the consumers, and where retailers are also going to offer more of those products.
What I find fascinating right now are price points. I mean, we were talking about that just before we came into the room. To sell 2 patties for $8 at Sobeys right now is, I don't think it's sustainable, but it is part of a strategy. There's some excitement out there. People want to look at plant-based dieting as a viable option for them and their loved ones. But price points are all over the place. There are bargains out there, but these products are sold at a premium. But I'm not sure that will continue, because as the market grows, I expect the market to look for affordable alternatives. But right now, I went to a vegan butcher the other day. Yes, a vegan butcher. Bought 6 patties, plant-based patties, and 4 portions of mac and cheese, vegan mac and cheese, for $57. Okay. Of course, I can't afford to go back there every week, but in some stores, independent retailers, you can actually find the Beyond Meat patties 6 for $8 because they buy in bulk and they separate them. So it's really wonky what I see right now, and I'm not sure how that will impact demand and brands as well, in particular Beyond Meat.
Yeah, I would suggest it's a bit elitist right now at that sort of price point. When you look at, the current polling as we get closer to a federal election here, affordability in this country is a huge issue. So you're talking to a very small consumer base that can actually afford those types of things. So what needs to happen, though, Ian, from a pricing perspective, to be able to get it into sort of that sphere where it has more acceptability to a broader consumer? Is it margin reduction, or is it processing changes that need to take place?
Well, I mean, first I would say, we can't control what a retailer prices at. So I'll make that extremely clear at the beginning. And I think, too, is what you're finding out right now, too, is retailers are testing a lot of price points. They're not 100% sure of where these products will land, and frankly, a lot of them will, at the beginning and at the excitement, I mean, they'll take some extra profit. I think as more products become available, as the distribution builds, as there's more locations and just availability for consumers to say, I don't have to go to the vegan butcher to get what I want. I can go to other retailers and other stores. Then the retailers will start to say, okay, am I losing share to my competitor down the street based on what I'm offering, both in assortment and in price points? So I think that side will tend to figure itself out as more products come to market and broader distribution is available. I think on the processing side, I mean, that's with any type of food product. There is an ongoing effort to how do we drive costs out? And again, Beena could probably speak to this better than I. I mean, 14, 13 years ago, the cost to do this was probably higher and scalability wasn't what it is today. And so that's evolving as well as the manufacturers. There's more technology, there's more expertise going into this. So we'll kind of rebalance it on both sides. I think at the end of the day, though, we're not going to offer something with an assumption of what a price is. The retailers are going to have to manage that based on their competitive sets.
Yeah, I would just like to build on that, which is I think at the end of the day, if it's going to be a choice for a flexitarian who's willing to eat meat, you're going to have these products that are parity priced. You're not going to be able to sustain to the flexitarian who has those choices to make that premium price. So I think it's got to end up leveling off, and meat comparisons will be made, especially if you're sitting in the meat section. I just also want to add, interestingly, over the years, this soy was the main protein, and it has come down in price and a lot of more competitive pricing in the marketplace. The Beyond Meat burger is being made with pea protein, which is a lot more expensive, and it's why the pricing is higher. So there is a part around agricultural development and processing development around pea protein and the technology around the types of textures you could get with pea protein that will evolve, get the price down at some point in the future. So we're not there yet.
Yeah, I would say that in terms of procurement, I am concerned because I actually did talk to a few people that are in the plant-based space, and they're very concerned about having access to ingredients over time as they scale their operations up. The one thing that I think is going to happen is that we are going to see a market that will educate itself more on plant-based dieting, because right now it's about Beyond Meat. It's quite simple right now. The collective dialogue around plant-based dieting is very simple, but I agree with you. I think over time, people will actually realize that there are different kinds of proteins and different tastes and textures, and companies. And I'm thinking of Canadian companies. That's an opportunity for Canadian companies to look into gaps created by the Beyond Meat phenomena. Because Beyond Meat is a good product, but it's not a perfect product.
Well, maybe the Alberta farmers can convert their canola fields over to peas.
Maybe they need it now more than ever.
One of the things I've found, though, over the years where I've experienced these products is that the taste and texture is changed dramatically. And one of the selling points of the Beyond Meat product is that it is very close to a real burger, which I think will be very helpful. Retail is going to play a massive role in this whole thing. And one of the things is, where in the store should this product be? And I know there's a lot of experimentation going on, but Beena, from your perspective, what's the ideal location in a retail environment for this product?
So we have some really interesting data that says that the bulk of the products currently being purchased in that meat alternative space is still being purchased by vegans and vegetarians. So just number-wise, they're doing 18 trips a year, purchasing a product every 2.5 weeks. So that's the vegan and vegetarian, where the flexitarian, that's a really exciting new opportunity, are still only buying doing 1.2 trips a year. So they're a small portion. You can't walk away from your core user base today, which is vegans and vegetarians. And they don't shop the meat aisle regularly. As a matter of fact, there's vegans who really never shop it because they don't want to see bloody meat. So you got to keep it in the produce section for now. You could test, you could go after that flexitarian and put some product in the meat section where you're going to get the flexitarian to come and try it, but you can't walk away from your core user because they're shopping in the produce section and they want to find it there. I will say to retailers, the way to help the section overall is with signage in store. You could do something in that current space in the refrigerated, whether it's produce or deli aisle, by putting plant-based foods signage, the way they do with organic signage, to help a flexitarian find it when they don't have to go to the meat section. And the breadth of offerings in the section's much greater than what you'll find ever in the meat section, because retailers won't give up the kind of space in their meat section for the variety that you find currently in the meat alternative sections in the store. So I think retailers could do something about signage to help flexitarians find it where it is today in the produce aisle.
Yeah, I'd build on that. I think too, we're seeing this expansion of interest on the consumer side. The retailers a little more cautious of where do I move it, where do people find it. I think they're struggling too with this notion of today, currently, vegan, vegetarians are making the bulk of purchases, but they look at these numbers of 43% of Canadians want to increase the amount of plant-based products that they purchase. So that is moving that Venn diagram to include a lot more Canadians that aren't vegetarian and vegan. And so at some point, a consumer, a flexitarian is going to walk in and saying, we're having people over for the weekend. I want to offer an animal protein burger and a plant-based protein burger. Do you jump all the way to putting them side by side today? There's risk there. And I think to Beena's point, there is going to be this phase across retailers. Some retailers will move faster. Some will take a longer pace to it, but they've got to start carving out, is it a section within a section? Is it communication? Is it the ability to target someone online and have a digital communication with them of where they can find products based on what they've purchased? They all have strong loyalty programs to understand who's purchasing what. They can help to guide people to where these products are. But I think over time, you're going to see a broader inclusion in the mainline sections. It's just how fast do we get there?
I agree. There is a variety of strategies when selling these products in a store. What I think is going to happen over the next couple of years, actually, I thought it was going to be 5 to 7 years, but because of the Beyond Meat phenomena, I think we're accelerating things. I met a couple of startups here this week at Cial, and they were thinking of launching their product like next year, spring of 2020. They're looking at June to August of this year now, just because of what's going on. And I do think that pressure of seeing more products coming in on stream, grocers being visited by these vendors, they're going to have to rethink their strategy in the store. So, okay, there's the Beyond Meat, so where do we put these others that actually have something else to offer as well? And so I do think that store design, and I'm thinking out loud here, store design could actually be impacted by how we sell food now. We're not selling meat or we're not selling dairy, we're selling proteins. That's a different language altogether. Yep.
It's interesting. If you look at Sainsbury in the UK, they create a destination aisle for all plant-based foods. So it's not just meat-free, but you have the non-dairy beverage and the non-dairy cheeses, and they have signage, and it's just a way of eating, and they provide the whole offerings. So as opposed to a couple of SKUs ending up in the meat section and a couple of SKUs ending up next to the milk, they're creating this destination space. And you see Kroger in the US attempting it in some of their stores as well. So there is a whole redesign of the retail store that will allow that. Because right now, this one-off is not the end solution. I don't think it is anyway.
And I think there'll be a change too of just the actual metrics that a retailer will measure success of a performing SKU. So today we have, and we're not the only company that has vegetarian SKUs in the mix of the mainline sections of where we have other products. And it can be a struggle to maintain those spaces based on if a retailer is measuring turns versus, a chicken teriyaki versus a vegetarian frozen meal. So there has to be an education too of just, well, where is this going to go? And for a retailer, I think they need to be aware of, are they setting that groundwork of I'm a destination early, so that as the proliferation expands, they're already getting more of those shoppers into their stores. But it is a struggle today.
I will say, it's the same kind of situation we've had all along with organic foods, which is, mainstream foods turn faster, lower price. Organic was more expensive, turned slower. And retailers struggled with store within a store or integrated sets and watching how that's evolved. And they've gotten used to the fact that organic SKUs won't turn as quickly, but they still have to offer them because there's a consumer demand. So I think it's following a little bit like in that kind of format.
Yeah, I think they've had some experience. So you look at the evolution of natural health products in the store and categories, ethnic. Hopefully they'll follow some of that, because my expectation would be the evolving flexitarian, probably not quite as patient as the vegan in regards to finding it in the store and not really understanding to a certain extent where to look. So we'll give up before, unless the signage or the location works from that perspective. Also sounds like there could be a neat opportunity for a retail or to be first in option of sort of taking this and making it an interesting part of their store to attract that customer. One of the other challenges, I think obviously Beyond Meats has been a phenomenal accelerator for this category, and sort of, through the whole A&W and the massive amount of advertising they've done to support their product. Has the food guide really helped, or Canadian consumers, is it more the marketing that has driven this thing, or is the federal government getting involved from a Health Canada perspective actually having any significance? Sylvain?
I'd say the food guide. Yeah, the food guide was 5 to 7 years late. I mean, I think when I met with the Minister of Health, I think it was in January, they acknowledged it. I mean, 12 years to release a new food guide is a long time. A lot of things are happening in the food space. And frankly, the way I've been at Cial, this is my 17th year at Cial, and what I find is change is happening much faster now than 5 years ago. And the food guide really never reflected that change until now. We're just it's just an exclamation mark on what we all kind of knew what was going on. The only concern I have with the food guide is that it just there's not a whole lot of Canada in there. I mean, there are concerns from a supply perspective. Produce went up 15% in year to year in March when numbers came out, and so there's some concerns there from a food security perspective that I think should be addressed. And in fact, I'm in Ottawa next week meeting with Health Canada to look at this issue.
I'll say the one thing on the food guide is they are introducing these concepts to the kids at school. So it's starting, I don't think it's having any influence on what's happening in the marketplace today. That's been happening for the last few years, way before the food guide. But there's an educational piece with the kids going through school now that makes it more approachable and acceptable to eat plant-based foods that will continue to drive this flexitarian movement over the next 20 years.
I just want to add one thing. The one thing that did change with the food guide, which is it's anecdotal evidence, but it's kind of fun. When you talk to Sobeys, you talk to Loblaws, often people will show up at the grocery store in January with the cookbook they just got for Christmas, Martha Stewart, Ricardo, whoever, and they say, how do I get all these ingredients in that recipe? Well, since the food guide came out, there are more people coming into the store to, look, where can I find these things that are on that picture? That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I think it doesn't hurt with the food guide, but I think for today's marketplace, I mean, we're a company that looks at what are people buying in restaurants as a first place to get an indication of where are those trends going to end up of what shows up in a grocery store. So I think that early adoption of some of those meals and introductions even in millennials wanting to have food experiences and trying new things in restaurant, I mean, I think that has a bigger introduction and impact on what people are then looking for in grocery stores. So I think some of the social marketing aspect is happening outside of stores. And then when you start to get to quick service restaurants that are advertising and communicating plant-based, I mean, then you've hit a whole new level of just awareness that's out in the marketplace. And people tend to look at they want to replicate the food experience when they go out and they're having a more social, enjoyable evening meal, whatever it is, with others, and the food is a part of that. They want to kind of replicate that with what they can get in a grocery store.
Yeah, I think food service has been instrumental in this. And to your point, with millennials, their consumption of out-of-home food is going through the roof, which is having some negative impacts in grocery growth right now. So they do have that opportunity to.
Well, you can say it's negative, but I think too, if foods companies, react to that and really start to say that's the trend of where consumers want to go.
Yeah.
I mean, you'll see an increase in innovation and new flavors introduced because they're keying off of.
Well, the
what do people
Americans
actually want.
the typical American will spend more than 51% of their budget dollars on their food dollars outside the home, focusing on food consumed outside the home. In Canada, we're below 40, but we're catching up to the Americans. We'll reach that 50-50 point, which I think is a great opportunity. I think there is this blurring line between service and retail. Retail will affect service and vice versa, but on the plant-based file, clearly, because of what happened with A&W, food service really set the tone and influenced grocers to move forward on this.
But let me add to the piece about food service that's interesting is that I'm not sure the education is quite there on what people are buying. So they're buying a a Beyond Meat burger, and you compare the nutritionals on a Beyond Meat burger to the A&W regular beef teen burger with bacon and cheese, and it has the same amount of calories, and it has the same amount of fat, and it has more sodium. And so you have this halo.
But you're saving the planet.
Right. Well, no. So you got this halo of plant-based, which people think might be healthier, and when they actually see the numbers, might not be. But you're right. If their motivation is saving the planet, it's a closest match possible to a beef burger. So I think the educational piece in food service, and we've all been caught. Like, we've all had a salad in a restaurant because we thought we were eating healthier, and then when they put the calories on the menu, you say, oh my goodness, I could have had 6 other things on the menu that I would have preferred that had less calories. It's the same thing that's happening now. I think you get away with it in food service because people don't see the nutritionals, and as it moves into retail, the nutritionals on, the nutrition facts panels will be there, the comparisons will be there. We got to watch, sodium content, fat content. Currently proposed regulations on front of pack labeling would require the Beyond Meat burger to have high in saturated fat and high in sodium. So we've got to parallel that to an overarching "it's healthier for you" message. It's going to be an interesting one. But they exactly to Sylvain's point, they talk about saving the planet, and if nutrition isn't the dominating motivation for a consumer, it's a great product. So I think it really comes down to consumer choice, and they'll be more educated over the next year to really understand what works best for them.
Is that going to be a limiting factor, though? When you walk into a grocery store, let's hope we don't get to the front of pack labeling regime that's being discussed. but you have a high end with two key things. I would think that the flexitarian that's looking for health is potentially going to avoid that product. It's going to have a stunting impact, shall we say, in regards to potential growth.
Well, the front of package labeling policy is going to discriminate against a whole lot of different products that are perceived as healthy or are actually, in fact, healthy. It's just, it's a dangerous road to take, because the package will basically entice people to make wrong decisions or not the right decisions for them. And that's, I don't know. I'm concerned about that.
Well, maybe when you're seeing Health Canada next week, you can remind them of our position on that.
We just changed the panel
Yeah, sorry, I think
here.
we're all concerned about it. So,
Yeah.
so I was just saying proposed. Certainly none of us want that, a regulation.
I know. I'm an academic. I just say what I want.
The regulatory regime that exists, Beena, both you and Ian are members of Plant-Based Foods of Canada, which is an organization that actually FCPC set up as a working division, mainly because there are a lot of regulatory issues that need to be dealt with. What are the barriers that you're up against currently?
So from a regulation standpoint, you've got an interesting, antiquated regulation framework. So first of all, in plant-based meats, they actually use actual meat as gold standard. So they require fortification, which requires a bunch of minerals and vitamins to be put in the product, makes the ingredient declaration much longer and complicated. And we know we have this consumer desire for simpler ingredient declarations that are of products that they could find in their cupboards. So this is a forced fortification. Interestingly, on the flip side, in non-dairy beverage, which is also plant-based, they don't allow you to fortify. So the regulations are a little bit forcing innovation, changing innovation based on regulations, not keeping up with what consumers are looking for, as one example. The other one right now, that all plant-based meats actually have to have simulated meat product on the front of the pack, those words, because years ago, Health Canada was worried that a consumer would be fooled into thinking it was meat. Well, today the consumer gets it. You say it's a veggie burger, plant-based burger, they don't think it's meat. They've been educated, but our regulations are still dated back however many years to when they were worried about that, and they just haven't kept up with the consumer, with the education, with the and considering they recommended plant-based foods in the food guide, the regulations aren't getting there at the same pace. So so that's that need to get Health Canada and get that modernization happening.
Yeah, I would agree. I think it's modernization. It's old modeled. It's even to the process to be able to make a protein claim is very challenging, and it's an antiquated model. I think there's other jurisdictions across Europe, New Zealand, Australia that I think Health Canada can reach out to and get an understanding of. Are you moving away from a protein efficiency to a actual just what's the protein content and absolute amount in the food is something too that I think consumers respond better to as well. So it's just they've just got to catch up with the educated consumer is already at.
We just have a couple of minutes left. So what I'd like to do is sort of ask each of you to be visionaries for a minute and just talk a little bit about where you see this all going, and what the world may look like 5 years from now around this category. Sylvain?
So what I see right now is policy trying to suppress innovation, unfortunately. Especially in Canada, I'm often disappointed to see so much regulations, and I get it. I know why. Governments are often motivated to adopt regulations to protect the public, food safety. It's very important. But at the same time, we need to think about our economics. And frankly, food processing is anemic right now. It's just, we lost 22,000 jobs in 5 years. We've only built a handful of plants compared to 4,000 in the US over the last decade. It's frustrating. And if you want to grow the food business in Canada or in North America, if you want to innovate, you want to provide high quality products to consumers, you have to support food processing as much as possible. And right now, policies aren't. I think that is going to change over time because of the dire situation we're in right now. There is going to, maybe this is wishful thinking, but I think there's going to be an awakening around what innovation means. And on the environmental file, that's what we're seeing right now. Plastics are a problem. Plastics are the menace. And everyone is struggling to find out what can we do. And industry is trying to innovate, trying to find solution, while government is trying to figure out how do we address this issue. Industry is always ahead. As soon as policy gets ahead of industry, that's when you get into trouble. That's probably going to change.
Yeah, I would look at the demand space for these products over the next 5 years, and I think there's a huge opportunity. And I think you've really got there are so many positives about plant-based foods and it crosses a huge spectrum. So you have everything from vegan, vegetarian, through this flexitarian space. And there's a whole ladder of just how do I eat a little bit healthier? What decisions do I make? It goes beyond meat. I didn't mean to say it that way, but it goes past meat, dairy alternatives. It's that broader plant-based foods and just a larger proportion of your overall diet with those products. That's going to continue. And like I said earlier, I think you've got 50% of millennials, which is a huge demographic group that have yet to really start having families. And when you start to have families, your purchase decisions and how you purchase your food changes. So that's going to create, it'll be very interesting to see, will millennial parents be a generation that actually, there's a lot of, they like their individual and they like it's personalized. So are they going to make multi-meals for the family, or is the whole family going to be consuming more plant-based products even from an earlier age as we see that next generation get introduced to this? And then I think too on the boomers, which is another large pocket of demographic, is that they have not been as fast to the adaptation of plant-based foods as millennials, and that's still a large market too to expand. So I think you've got a huge spectrum of opportunity, and you're going to see more companies look for ways of, how can we offer what this new consumer is looking for.
And I'd just say that if we look at a leading indicator market like the UK, and you look at what's happening there, and as I mentioned, 73% household penetration, and we're at 14. There's lots of runway here. But their sets in their stores, they have much, much larger sections, much wider breadth of variety. So I think that's going to evolve. I think historically, the set in Canadian retail stores is small. It's grown, but not as quickly as the category has grown. Doesn't have that presence, the feel, the signage that you see in the UK. So in the next 5 years, I think we're going to catch up.
I think it's an exciting time. I think, FCPC representing manufacturers here in this country, I'm excited because I think it's an opportunity for growth. What I'm also excited about is to see so many great companies embracing this as an opportunity to expand not only their manufacturing, but also their product lineups. And we're seeing a lot of capital investment going on. with regards to plants to be able to accommodate. Hopefully the government of Canada catches up from a policy perspective and doesn't become an inhibitor to growth as we get moving forward. But at the end of the day, as with all of our businesses, the consumer will define how this all works, and they seem to be pretty engaged right now. So let's hope the momentum continues. So to our panel, Sylvain, Ian, Beena, thank you very much. And to our audience, thank you for joining us this morning. Thank you.